Good morning, everyone, and a special good morning to all of my mama bears who are out there who are homeschooling, ready to rip their hair out. Been there, done that. As a homeschooling parent of a neurodivergent child, it can be really overwhelming. It can be scary. You can have a lot of imposter syndrome. You can have these thoughts that you're not enough, that you don't know what you're doing, that you are really unsure as to what the next steps are. And this is why my special guest, Afsaneh, is going to come on and chat to us about all the most amazing things with regards to homeschooling. So she's got 20 years under her belt, guys. 20 years. She is so accomplished in so many areas. I don't want to be banging on because I really want you to hear it from her. But it's so important that I'm so glad to have you. So welcome. Welcome to the Everyday Heroes podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so thrilled to be here.
Excellent. Thank you. So share with us and share with our community a little bit more around your background and what led you to become a homeschooling coach.
So the super short version is that I went into teaching and ended up in classrooms full of neurodivergent, traumatized children. Some had diagnoses, some didn't, and I had to figure it out. It was
Yeah.
sink or swim as a teacher. And that became the beginning of my career as an educator. And I did a lot of teacher training. I did a lot of, teaching graduate level and got really into teaching teachers how to teach.
Yes.
And wasn't really focused on homeschooling as the plan for my life since I was so immersed in classroom teaching and in school settings and all of that. And then when I had my own child, preschool really didn't go very well at all. And it was really clear by age 4 that either I was going to homeschool or this incredible, unique, tiny human being was going to be broken from school and hate learning. And so we made the decision to homeschool. And during that time, I also wrote my first children's book. I'm a children's author. I'm a curriculum writer, just to help everyone know how I'm coming into this work. But even with all of that background, it was still incredibly difficult to figure out homeschooling. A lot of resistance, a ton of physical aggression, and I had to figure out what it meant to homeschool this individual with everything I knew about how kids learn, child development,
Yes.
child psychology, everything, put it together, but then package it for this child and what this child needed. And it took longer than I wish it did. It took a few years to really figure it out. And it was really awful for both of us in that time. And once I did figure it out, it's like night and day, like so quickly. It clicks, things fall into place. And then I thought, well, how are other parents supposed to figure this out? So I became a homeschooling coach. And since then, I have the honor of supporting parents who are struggling to homeschool their unique neurodivergent kids with or without a diagnosis.
Yes. Yes.
If it's working or if it isn't.
Exactly.
And that's what I've been doing ever since.
I love that. I love that because I definitely know, if I go back to my own experience, when we decided to homeschool my angel boy, I just thought, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm not a teacher. I don't know. But in the same breath, I know him better than anybody else, right? I know him like the back of my hand. So if I can take my theory was, if I can take my knowledge of how much I know him and apply the learning, because let's be honest, he went into homeschooling when he was in grade 2, and we're teaching grade 2. We're not teaching calculus. Let's just relax there for a second. And so just being able to take his interests and then teach that around whatever he's learning. And that was my biggest segue into teaching whatever I needed to teach, and taking whatever he was interested in, converting it into something that was teachable and making it fun, including movement. Is that something that you would say is on the right track, or would you suggest a completely different tact?
No, I think that's brilliant. I was going to say, I don't think it's always a great idea, that I don't think it's true. I will say it this way. I don't think it's true that classroom teachers automatically make the best homeschooling parents, because homeschooling, especially a neurodivergent kid, requires a completely different approach to their learning that really goes against everything we know about schooling, about traditional schooling, about how learning looks, how it looks or what it's like, that comes from our experience, either as a teacher or as the student. And really none of that works for neurodivergent kids. If it did, then they could go to school and be okay. So it really requires just letting go of all of the ideas that you have, expectations that you have of how your child is going to learn and what learning looks like. So, and I think that's often why it becomes such a huge struggle, because parents look at, okay, I want to homeschool. Let me buy a curriculum, set up a learning space. Okay, great. Let's do math now. Let's do history now. And the child says no, loudly, quietly, crying, however they say no. And then the parent just doesn't know what to do. And it's too limiting, it's too restrictive, and it really doesn't work for kids whose brains are wired and they're processing information in their own unique ways. So they need what I call best practice. They need something totally different that's the best of learning, the highest level of learning, the most intellectually challenging. That's really what they crave and what they need in order to be able to do it.
So can you just outline a little bit for our audience what best practices means?
Yeah, so it's really seeing the child as an equal participant in their learning. And I would even say that they're the ones responsible, right? If you're doing more work than they are, then there's a problem. So they are the ones who, know what is right for them. So the resistance that comes up means that the child is saying, this is not right for me. I can't do what you're asking me to do in the way you're asking me to do it at the time you're asking me to do it. So rather than trying to get them to do it anyway, it's to understand this assignment, this learning activity is not developmentally appropriate for them. This is not a good fit for them. And then that's hard. I don't want to make it sound so simple, because then parents are like, well, what else am I supposed to do? I don't know what else to do. But it's entering into a partnership where you see your child's resistance as a litmus test. Is this good or not for them? So if it isn't good, it's trusting and respecting that and validating that, and then taking a different approach to their learning. And that it really does look different from one family to the next. But,
absolutely. It's funny because I know I hear this from a few friends who homeschool. And I think I felt this a lot when I was going through the beginning, was that if he didn't do the assignment, it was a reflection on me. Like I did it wrong. It was my fault and I got it. And then it always then comes back to like, but no, hang on, let's just, it's no one's fault, right? It just means that this is not the right work for us. So let's just take a break. Let's just take a breath. Let's have a snack. Let's have a sit down. Let's do some sensory break or whatever you're going to do. And then let's look at what their interests are again and let's reevaluate. Because I think that for so many parents, we're holding that idea that we can somehow, we've always got to get it right. And the only thing, this is why I keep going back to it as well, is that we've only got school as a reference point, right? We don't have a homeschool reference point. So how do you then understand what to do if you've got no idea of what that looks like? So you're just sort of winging it, right? Do you think that is the case with most parents?
Yeah, I think definitely there's a lot of pressure. I think parents feel like their job is to get their kids to do the curriculum, that's where the learning takes place. And if it's not getting done, then learning isn't happening. And then all the fears, the worries, the stress, the everything. And I think, especially, I'm not going to say it's only moms, but especially moms, we blame ourselves for everything. Like if it rains, and, our kid is so excited to go to the playground, it starts raining. It's almost like it's our fault that it's raining and we can't get them to the playground. Like it's a bit ridiculous how much, and I'm guilty of it. I'm still guilty of, wanting to fix everything and make everything as perfect as possible for my child. But really it's very limiting. I will say it's
Yeah.
quite limiting if you're letting someone else decide what your child is learning and
Yep.
how they're learning it, and that's it, and that's the cut.
Yes. Yep.
And it's a lot better if you feel empowered and free to kind of go with it.
Yeah.
But I don't think that means limiting what your child learns. Like, I think sometimes parents make a mistake. They say, oh, my child is reacting so badly to the math assignment, so we won't do math right now. I don't think it means limiting the learning at all. I don't think we get to decide what our kids learn and what they're able to do, what their development looks like today. We don't know. We don't decide that. I think it's giving the opportunities and the support and the structures for kids to just go run with what they're able to do, and then go as far as they can with it without sacrificing any of the academics. I don't think that that's what we're talking about at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And so are you seeing an increase in homeschooling?
Massively. And unfortunately, I work with parents anywhere and everywhere, but largely it's parents in the United States, and schools do not have the funding or want to spend the money to give kids the resources in the classroom that they would need. And the shift towards standardized testing has really put a lot of pressure on kids to get the correct answer in this one way.
Yeah. Yep.
That really doesn't work for
No, I never
neurodivergent
understood
kids.
that. Why is it that, like, and maybe I'm incorrect in saying this, but like, if the child gets the right answer, like, who gives a hoot how they got there? Like, if they got the right answer, they got the right answer, assuming they're not cheating, right? Like, if they got the right answer, isn't that the whole point? But I'm hearing from teachers that no, they need to see it done and they need to see the workings, that like how you got to that conclusion. But I'm like, okay, well, but not everyone thinks that way.
Right. And then if you think about neurodivergent kids, especially kids on the spectrum, the arbitrary doesn't make any sense to them. So if you give a math problem and they give you the answer, and then you want them to show their work or show their work in a specific way, to them, you're asking them to do it twice.
Yes.
Why? It's arbitrary. It doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like almost painful for them to do that.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of resistance to being able to do that. And, there's a lot of trends in education. There's a lot of, the schools will buy a program, buy a curriculum. This is how it's done. This is the script given to teachers. There's a lot of changes that have gone on in public education. It doesn't look like how it used to look in the 80s or the 90s. It's quite different now. And it's harder for kids to put themselves in their learning, to feel creative, to feel intellectually challenged at times. There's a whole lot of bodies in a room and one adult who has to manage all of that and get through the curriculum. Really tough job. So there isn't necessarily the space. The curriculum that they're using now doesn't really give space it's called differentiate, for people to do it at different skill sets, different abilities, different ways. That's not really what's commonly going on anymore. So it's a difficult thing. So yes, I do think far more parents are choosing homeschooling. I think the pandemic showed kids that there was another way to learn without the pressure and the anxiety of being in a classroom. And a lot of kids didn't want to go back.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I have definitely seen a lot of that. I also think that trying to recreate school at home, that's not what we're trying to do when we homeschool. And I think a lot of people who don't know what homeschooling is assume that we're doing that, right? Because you see a lot of it on like influencers with Instagram and everything else, and everyone's like dressed up and and this is what we do now. And like, well, that's definitely not how my homeschool looks like. There's paper everywhere, and we're just sort of going with the flow. And so I think that we have to break that idea of what homeschool looks like, first of all. But then there's an element of the struggling from the parents' point of view. And that sort of goes into my segue of the next question is, Why do you think parents are struggling? Do you think that they are trying to recreate school at home, or do you think it's for other reasons? That blame that we were talking about before.
Sure. So first, I want to say, I don't know if we disagree on this or not. I want to just say, if you've bought a curriculum that you like and your kid's happy doing it and that's your homeschooling, great.
Yep.
If there's no
Yep.
problem, go for it. Whatever,
Yes.
Whatever's working for you, I don't want to change it.
Yep.
This is really for parents who the kids are not engaged in their learning. They're not thriving. They're resisting. There's huge battles over getting a few math problems, reading some stuff, writing something down, doing the work is more energy for you. And the kid is sitting there crying in crisis, refusing. And that's what homeschooling, that's what we're talking about. Then something needs to change. And I think the first thing is the resistance that your child is exhibiting has nothing to do with you. I think parents take it personally. I think it becomes very frustrating. It feels like your child is telling you they don't want to learn from you, that you're a failure, that you can't teach them, that all of those. And I say this because I felt this way. Like I can teach, I've taught hundreds and hundreds of kids, but I can't teach my child.
Yeah.
There's something about me that makes it impossible for me to teach this child. And that isn't true. It completely isn't true. It's that the assignment, the approach is not right for them. It's like trying, those shape games. It's like trying to fit a circle into a triangle. It's just not. And so it really has to do with this radical acceptance of who your kids are, right? Because usually you're homeschooling more than one. Who are these children? How do they learn? What do they need? And again, I don't want to act like it's so simple to figure that out. That's why I exist as a homeschooling coach to help parents. So it's not, if you don't know this, there's something wrong with you. This is, how would you know this? But it's to really understand that our kids are the center of their own worlds. They're not thinking about us. They're not thinking about you. They don't take us into consideration at all. So this is about them looking at what they're being asked to do and having a negative reaction to it, which is then sparking anxiety. Neurodivergent kids have so much anxiety. And as soon as that anxiety kicks up, they can't focus. They can't do it anyway. They feel too anxious about it. So it's creating learning experiences that have nothing to do with their anxiety, where they can feel comfortable and confident. And a lot of that means, really making it intellectually challenging and quite open so that they can bring themselves to the learning. So it can't be a one size fits all approach. And, if you personally, it's your job for them to learn, then you become like a supervisor, like a manager. Like you've got to get them to do it. So either, and then we say, oh, you can do it, which makes them more anxious. Oh, get it done and we can do this thing you like, which makes, sometimes that works. And sometimes it makes them even more anxious because they can't do it. And then it turns to, if you don't do it, then you're going to lose screen time. We're not going to do this thing you want to do, the takeaway, which generally leads to an explosion. Because at that point, your child, the first time they say, this is hard, this is boring, whatever they've said, you don't take that to heart and make a change, then they feel like that you haven't heard them. And then they have to tell you even louder that they and then there's the power struggles, the explosions, the meltdowns, the exhaustion, the real exhaustion. And it doesn't feel good for our kids either. They're happy to get to learn,
Yes. And I think that we're learning all the time. Just because we're not sitting at a desk doesn't mean that they're not learning, right? They're learning in so many different ways. And we just need to be open to say that learning can look like whatever, creating a train set. It can learn like opening. I was listening to a summit just recently. And the lady was sharing that this boy was opening and closing a drawer and he was studying it. And mum was just like, I don't understand. And then he took it all apart and mum was like livid. And then he put it all back together. And I was like, and he was 3 years old, right? So this is just like, it's nuts to think. I think it was like Mrs. Speechy P. I think that's who was talking about the story. That we are creatures that will learn all the time. But just because we don't learn in a typical way doesn't mean that we're not learning, right? We're still learning. It's just
Right.
not what we're used to seeing. So let's go, just going back to a second. So you've got this child, they're having explosive meltdowns, they're not coping, there's tears, where they're not wanting to do the homework. What tips, tools, or strategies would you suggest to parents to sort of help them bridge that gap so that we can get back to learning being more fun and more educational for them?
Yeah, the first step, this is the secret ingredient, the secret sauce.
Yes.
The first step is kids will always say that there's a problem first before there's a meltdown or a crisis. They will always say it. And maybe it is as simple as, I'm tired, this is boring, this is hard, I can't do this. But they will always tell you, if your child is verbal. If your child's not verbal, it's a different conversation. If your child is verbal, they will tell you. It is up to you in that moment to validate, to really listen, hear them, validate, and have a plan B. The second that you even uncontrollably roll your eyes like, here we go again, or get a disappointed look on your face, or look frustrated, or look disappointed, which of course you are. Of course, another day you plan something, you think it's fun, your kid says, no, you want to rip your hair out, but they are looking to you for how to feel about themselves, right? So if you can think your thoughts, think whatever you want to think, but it could come out in a patient, loving, even just repeating, oh, I hear you, this is too hard. Or, oh, you think this is boring. Okay. If that can be the first thing that you do instead of all the thoughts that triggers when your child does it, all the thoughts about you, about their learning, about their future, about what's going to happen now, about how the day's going to go. Oh, here we go again. Now we're going to have a power struggle. If you can stop, you can think all those things, but if you could maybe just pause and not think them right in that moment, and just say back to them what they've said, even if you have no idea what else to do. If you just say back to them what they've said, they can stay calm. Your child does not have to get anxious and dysregulated because you aren't hearing them. Let them feel seen and heard, and then they can stay calm enough where you can have a conversation about what's going to happen next and be able to problem solve together. But like I said, if this is what's happening, it means there needs to be a different approach to their learning. Because if it's not developmentally appropriate, they can stay calm and you can problem solve, but they can't do that assignment because that assignment is not right for them. So you can use communication to keep things calm, but then you have to know what else to do. So that's really the thing, which makes sense. I mean, we've had to learn a million new ways about parenting, communicating, raising our kids, because our kids are amazing and really unique. So this is another thing to learn, another tool you need in your toolbox for making this.
So now let's say I've got two questions here. First of all, the first one is, what do you do if your child is non-speaking? So I'm thinking about my angel boy. I'm also thinking about others that I know who have minimal language, might not be completely non-speaking, but like, what in those cases where they're not able to say I'm tired or this is boring or whatnot, what would you, in that situation, are we just trying a completely different tact? Are we doing something more fun? Like, what would you suggest in that situation?
Well, so there's a bit of detective work, right? So resistance is behavior is communication. So if you remove the causes of resistance, then you remove the resistance. Like that's really how it works. So that's true for brushing teeth, getting shoes on, anything that's going to come up throughout the day. So a child who's nonverbal, you still know your child, you know their cues, you know when they're not okay with something, when they don't want to do something. So the trick is to not push them to do it anyway. but it's to figure out a different approach so that you both win. So it also isn't to back off completely and say, okay, we're not going to do any reading today. We're not going to do any math today. We're not going to do any homeschooling today because I don't want you to get upset.
Yeah.
It's that the specific thing is upsetting, not learning in general, not even math in general. So however you communicate with your child, it's to then offer. This is why I'm saying it's really important to have a different approach that works with your kid, which comes through having some understanding of this, but also a bit of trial and error, and then being able to have something else on offer. So it isn't even to say we're not going to do any work with math today, but it's okay, this didn't get a positive reaction. Let's do this. Let's do this. I think in general, learning, to me, it doesn't matter how old you are. I think learning has to feel fun in order for us to do it. I don't think, when it comes to reading and parents say my kid won't read, it's like, if you gave me an instructional manual, I wouldn't read anyway. If it's tedious and boring, I don't want to do it. Why would our kids want to do it? So it is thinking about, who is this person? What do they think is interesting? What do they think is fun? And then you feeling empowered and in control to know what learning is happening and how, so that it continues to happen throughout the day, even if it looks very different. It can take on very different form, but you still know what learning is taking place and how one thing builds on to the next and the next and the next, so that I work with parents on the back end. The package, who cares how it's packaged, right? The kids care how it's packaged. The kids care about what you're asking them to do. But we work on the back end of what is the learning, why, and then how is it going to be presented. But the parent is the one really in control of what is going to be learned in what way. Maybe not the specific topic. Maybe the kid decides, I want to learn about ancient Rome, but that they're doing short story writing, they're learning about adjectives, they're doing this in math, XYZ, right? So the back end is the work of the adult. The actual learning and the experience and the creation, that's the work of the child. That's their responsibility. So it's a shared responsibility. But for the parents, I know parents feel so out of control when there's resistance and learning isn't happening. They feel so out of control, but they're actually the ones in control because they're creating the learning experiences that the kids are resisting. So we have all of the power and control. If you actually look at it that way, the kids are powerless and all they can do is resist when something isn't right for them. So we have to trust our kids. We have to trust that they're not doing it for a really good reason. And then we have to figure out a different way for them to do it where it feels comfortable and where everybody wins. Everybody's needs get met and everybody wins. It can't be one person at the expense of the other, one person's needs at the expense of the other person's needs. Yes. Then has to change.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. So many things are going through my head right now in terms of the way that I homeschool, right? In terms of, when he has had resistance, which is definitely when he's dysregulated or if he's tired or if he's overwhelmed or if he feels like he can't do it, right? There's that feeling that I don't know what the answer is. So I'm just going to push back and I'm not going to know. I guess my worry is then, how do you know what the next plan B is what if you don't know what the plan B is? You've obviously got a plan for that in case plan A doesn't work, right?
Yeah, I think it's being really clear on what you would like your child to experience or learn or practice. Being really clear on that. Yeah. And then there's an infinite number of ways to learn something. There isn't only one way to learn something, but you really have to ditch a lot of ideas. There's a lot of parents who think that kids have to have the multiplication table memorized. Some kids' brains are wired in a way that is incredibly difficult and maybe isn't going to happen for them or isn't going to happen for a while. It's not going to happen grade 3 or whatever grade you memorized it. It might be later on because our kids are on their own developmental paths, or they might not memorize it. But, memorizing the states and their capitals, memorizing the multiplication table, showing your work when you do math problems. There's all these things that are ingrained in us as what learning means, or, these milestones, these necessary things that you have to do in order to learn correctly. And it's really hard. It really takes a radical shift in approaching the whole concept of learning. And yes, a day where not very much happens that was on your plan, it doesn't mean that no learning has taken place. That's why you need the overall plan. So if one day, okay, it becomes more, let's watch a documentary or some YouTube videos, it's still learning, but it's not maybe what you wanted to see happen, but then it's what's happening over the course of the week, and what are the kids making and creating and showing, right? So I always call it proof of learning. I think it's on kids to show endless proof of learning, because they're the ones that have to learn.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Yeah, definitely. I think that's such a great thing. I think we just need to take some pressure off ourselves as parents just for a second. But planning, what's that saying? If you don't plan, you plan to fail. Is that the saying? So just sort of having that idea of, I don't necessarily know that it's enough to just wing it. I think we do need to sit down and have a little bit of a plan in terms of what we're going to try and teach. And like you said, there's multiple ways of teaching one thing. So let's look at what's our intention, and then just working around that. No, I think that's great. Okay, so first of all, what's the book that you have written so that we can share it? And I will get if you can send me the link, we'll share it in the show notes as well.
I have a picture book series called the Jamie is Jamie series, put out by Free Spirit Publishing, and it's available in the English speaking world, different online bookshops. So I can definitely share those 3 books. And then I have a book up on Amazon called Homeschooling Outside the Box, which is my approach to homeschooling. And it kind of lays out a lot of what I show, work with my clients. And, that's really what it's about, is knowing, what do you do next? What do you do instead? And that doesn't end, but then also, how do you collaborate with your child so that they're problem solving with you? So when you say taking the burden off of your shoulders, it's actually really important that we're sharing this responsibility with our kids, because especially neurodivergent kids, they're going to have anxiety. They're going to have sensory things that come up. They have to know how to problem solve so that they know how to prevent and how to take care of themselves later on in life. If they have a job and there's a really loud noise, what are they going to do? They have to know, they have to be able to anticipate, or if something happens, they have to know how to take care of themselves in that moment. So we have to develop the problem solving and the communication skills along the way, so that they're prepared to go be independent. And I always joke, I say, we want to do this start as young as possible, because how many years do we want to be the ones who know where the shoes are, right? Mom, where's my shoe? Mom, where's my this? Mom, where's that gets old.
It sure does.
Do it forever, right? But that's, how do we begin to shift the responsibility onto our kids? And I think it really starts with learning, with, as young as preschool age. They're the ones finger painting, they're the ones building, they're the ones doing it. It's not for us to do it or for us to micromanage. And with planning, it's planning things that are not micromanaged activities. It can't be activities where there's only one way to do something. It has to be activities where you know what the learning is, what skills are being practiced, but there's space for the child and kids of different ages too to do it in their own way.
Yes.
And that's very different. It's very, very different than being in school. Completely
100%.
different.
100%. Okay, I love that. I will grab the links off you later, and we will share them in the show notes, and as well as on socials. So where can people buy these books?
They're on Amazon, Bookshop, all sorts of online bookstores, and they're in bookstores as well, but I'm not sure of the list in Australia.
Yeah, that's okay. We will. I'm sure I will. I'm no doubt everyone can purchase it from Amazon, but I will have a look and see where else we can get them. Okay, so now it is time for rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So what's one piece of advice that you would give a parent who's just about to start their homeschooling journey?
Along the way, if something doesn't feel good, don't keep doing it.
Yes. Yes. I love that. What is a sensory tool or strategy that you swear by?
Humor.
Yes.
Always.
Yes, always. Okay. What is your favorite way to connect with a child?
Reading a book together.
Yes. Is there a book that you would recommend outside of the ones that you've written? Is there a book that you would recommend for parents who are starting a homeschool journey?
With a neurodivergent child, I would
Yeah.
say The Explosive Child by Ross Greene.
Okay, great. I will link that in the show notes as well. Okay, perfect. And is there a mantra or a quote that you live by?
Um, let's see. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Pretty much. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And I'll pop everything in the show notes so that if people have any questions, they can have a look at it. And people, before we go, where can people find you?
Yeah, I was going to say mlccoaching.com, or you can send me a DM on Instagram. It's my last name dot my first name, Moradian.Afsaneh, or MLC Homeschool Coaching, I think it comes up as. And
Yes.
I have free consultation calls. So
Okay,
whether or
great.
not you think you need coaching, if you just want to talk about what's going on and get an action plan that maybe involves a coach, maybe doesn't at all, schedule a free consultation. Let's talk about what's going on and how you wish it could be instead. And then we'll bridge the gap and get you there. That's
Yes.
every problem has a solution. That's my other mantra. But
Yes.
especially with homeschooling, every problem has a solution.
I love that. Does MLC stand for anything specific?
Not really. It's from another project I was doing years ago, and I just kept it because
Fair
I
enough.
have a challenging name. So MLC is easier to remember than
Fair
F.
enough. No, that's fine. That's great. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really thoroughly enjoyed this chat, and I will pop everything up on socials soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks, Afsaneh. Bye.